Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Newfound Happy Hour. Happy January. Happy 2023. If you're new here, thanks for joining. If you want to catch up on the previous season, there was 12 episodes to that, all talking about different topics and different people. So I would encourage everyone to check those out. If you have anyone that you think would be good to talk to, let me know. And thanks for joining us now. I was thinking of changing the logo and changing the music, but I don't know. Not everything has to be changed and adjusted at the beginning of a year. I know we all feel that way, and I definitely get motivated by goals and making plans and stuff. That's just the Virgo energy in me, I think. But yeah, some things can stay the same, and I'm going to leave those the same for now. This is the first episode back of the new year and of season 2. I decided that I'm going to do the seasons in years. I don't know how much longer I'm doing this, but I know that I have still so many more ideas for this to go. So I wanted to start off the new year. Well, I mean, this whole podcast is supposed to be a positive happy hour. Talking to local people and businesses here in Newfoundland, and my opinion on different things as a millennial woman from Newfoundland. If you haven't been here before, that's kind of the gist. And the goal is to just feel a little bit lighter, a little bit more motivated or at peace or inspired. I don't know. Whatever you're getting out of this, maybe you just want to listen and criticize. That's fine too. Thanks for being here. So I wanted to start off the year on a good note, something that could benefit everyone from listening to. I mean, I try to make most episodes like that, but obviously some relate to certain people more than other episodes. But this one, I think everyone would benefit from listening to this. I was kind of thinking of what is the best way to start off our year, and the next few episodes are all about that too. But this one, we're talking to Erin, who is a naturopathic doctor, and just talking about the work that she does. It's all like holistic medicine, and it's so interesting. And like I said, I think everyone can benefit from listening to this. Even if you just consider the points that she's making, I think that it will kind of give you an idea of what you should be looking at when it comes to your own health, especially here in Newfoundland, where we have a shortage of healthcare staff of all kinds. So she actually reached out to me. I had seen her page before, but once she mentioned that we could do an episode, I looked at the page and I realized that I had so many questions and so many topics that we could talk about. Like I say at the end of our conversation, I'm 100% making an appointment with her. I have so much that I want to tell her and try and get her opinion on. I think because we have so much information out there, it's a lot easier for us to be healthier than our parents, than our grandparents, than all those generations before. We have so many studies that are done on nutrition and hormones and all the things that we talk about today with Erin. So it's good that we have all those things, but it's really hard to decipher between what's real and what's not and what we need to focus on. Basically, in summary, she kind of says that everyone's different. So I guess the general rule is to not believe everything you see online and either try it for yourself or find someone like her who can assist in making an actual educated decision based on your own body and your own history. Especially because, like I said, I think a lot of listeners are women from the feedback that I've gotten. And something that has been a conversation in a lot of my friend groups has been getting off of birth control. And, you know, a lot of people are starting to have kids and realizing that they've been on these hormones for 5, 10, 15 years and just wanting to come off it so that they have more of a natural cycle. And so I'm sure that that's something that most women from their early or late teens have to think about, but we aren't really taught anything about it. So this is a super interesting conversation to me. Like I said, I think everyone can get something out of it, and we do cover a lot. So let's just get started. All right. Yeah. So today we're here with Erin, who is, I actually don't know your official job title.
I'm a
So maybe
naturopathic
we'll start with
doctor.
that. Okay.
All right, yeah. I'm a naturopathic doctor. So same as your MD in terms of like assessment and diagnosis and training, but we do things very differently.
Right. And how old are you? Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm 34 years old. I'm born and raised here in St. John's, Newfoundland. Um, I've been bopping around the eastern part of the country since I guess was like 19. Spent a couple of years in Montreal, and then ended up moving to Toronto to study naturopathic medicine. Came home for 2 weeks to flatten the curve in March 2020, and I'm still here.
Yeah. I love Toronto. But a lot of people did that and just
Yes.
never went back.
Yeah, it wasn't really a hot spot to stay in the early days of the pandemic. While I was working on all of my licensing exams and stuff, I was still working in the service industry. So it wasn't really clear when I was going back to work, and it wasn't clear when our licensing exams were really going to happen. So after a couple of days, I was like, okay, you know what? I can just go home and chill out there for a bit. So after a few months, I just kind of went back, packed up all my stuff, and decided that this is going to be home now.
Yeah, a lot of my friends did that too. Some of them ended up going back, but some
Yeah,
stayed.
no,
Hmm.
not this one. I'm
Yeah.
so glad to be back.
Yeah. And so how did you get into the career that you're in?
So, about 10, 15 years ago, I guess 15 years ago now, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I was, studying sociology, psychology, doing a lot of social work stuff. Um, but this mystery illness at the time, we couldn't figure out what was wrong. So, after I had finally been diagnosed, my GI specialist, and I mean, no fault of him really personally, I know it's like a system that he himself was trained in, just kind of told me that it didn't matter what I ate, it didn't matter how I lived, I was always going to be sick. And when you're like, 22 years old, that's like a life sentence.
Hmm.
And so I wasn't really going to take that. And, I started exploring things. So it first came through yoga that I was like, oh, wow, my guts feel really good after I practice yoga. And then, started really honing in on things in my diet that didn't really work for me. Um, I was introduced to naturopathy actually while I was in Montreal. And I didn't see this woman for more than 3 visits, and my entire life was changed. So when I was back in St. John's before I actually ended up moving to Toronto, I was working on my master's degree and bumped into this college at a career fair while I was looking for an entirely different booth. And it was just kind of like, I can do this. And I've always been really, really into like holistic healing, plants, kind of interacting with nature in that way. And so it just this whole light bulb moment went off in my head. And it was a good opportune time for me to change careers as well. So I just kind of packed my bags, jumped ship, and started studying at CCNM. Oh gosh, I think maybe 2, 3 months later.
Okay,
And
cool.
yeah,
Yeah. And so you have your own practice here?
yeah. So I practice independently here in St. John's. I was working as an associate for other clinics for a little while, but it just made more sense to me from a business perspective and, just from a cohesive perspective, like from clinical care and that kind of stuff, to just kind of go out on my own. So my office is now above the Natural Vibe at 272 Water Street. I'm the first of many wellness practitioners who are about to join the team. Yeah, right now it's just me, but soon there's going to be many more. I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
And what is a typical day like for you there?
Ooh, okay. So, no 2 days are the same. And that's what I love about it too. This kind of stuff, no two cases are the same. Everything is going to always keep me on my toes. And that's kind of what I always envision for my career is just everything is different every day. So Mondays tend to be like admin days, doing stuff like this, working on my social media, event preparation, things like that, just whatever needs to be done, a lot of emails. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are when I'm in office doing face-to-face patient care. You'll never see me in person before 10 a.m. While I
Fair.
am a morning person, I love it. But my mornings are kind of like special me time. If you're paying that much money for me and my brain, you're going to get the best of me and my brain. So I'll usually start seeing patients anywhere between 10 and 12. Some days, if I'm in office till like 8 p.m., I'll start at 2. Visits can be anywhere from 15 minutes to 75 minutes, depending on whether they're a new patient, they're a returning patient. I don't mode switch well. So I don't do treatment plans and research on the same days that I do patient care.
Hmm.
If I have a big gap, I might sit down and do it then, but usually I kind of finish up anywhere between 5 and 8, and then I'll head on home. I like to get most of my charting done. So everything that happens in the visit, I'll record it. I'll record as much of that as possible. But we'll also kind of leave space for myself to make notes after I've thought about it. Sometimes I'll kind of go home and make some voice notes on my phone. Um, I might do a little bit of research and stuff like that after work, but just for the sake of separation of, the work-life balance, I kind of
Hmm.
now where I can keep it at the office, I kind of just do all my stuff at the office. And of course, Fridays are admin days, treatment plan, research days. So I'll go in around 10 o'clock, anywhere 10 to 12 after a yoga class, and just kind of buckle down for a couple hours. Every second Saturday, I'll take people as well. So there's so much
Yeah,
variety.
definitely not repetitive.
Absolutely not, not at all in the least.
Yeah, which is good.
Keeps me on my toes.
And are your services covered the same as like a family doctor by insurance?
Oh my goodness, I wish, absolutely wish that
I
was the
didn't think
case.
about it until you said.
Unfortunately, where we are private medicine, it's pay out of pocket. I don't offer direct billing myself. So usually, if you do have extended benefits, they're typically covered.
Hmm.
Um, we're in the process of getting regulated now. Well, not really in the process. It's kind of slowed down and halted. There is a very small number of naturopathic doctors on the island. And so while we're trying to get regulated as primary care providers, it's going to be some time. And I don't think, I hope someday that it might get covered under MCP, but
Hmm.
it's going to be a bit on that one.
Yeah, it's too bad because we're struggling here, but we're going to talk about
Right?
that later, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess this question kind of leads into that. How are you like different from a family doctor?
Yeah. So in my training, naturopathic doctors were all trained the same way as GPs in terms of assessment and diagnosis. So we go through all the fun rigors of medical school, anatomy, biology, biochemistry, um, physiology, you name it. We do the whole thing. The way we treat, though, is quite different. So a lot of our patients already come to us on a wide variety of drugs. So we need to know pharmacology well because we need to know how those drugs are interacting with each other. We also need to know how our herbs and how our foods are going to interact with those medications. But what's also important to know is like nutrient depletion for medications and things like that, which doesn't often get discussed with the prescribing physician. The other things that we do, so obviously we treat with nutrition, supplements, herbs, homeopathics, traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, physical medicine. We do chiropractic in school, although I don't personally use it in my practice. We learn massage techniques, like a little bit of everything. The kind of goal is essentially to give the patient a full toolkit, right? Something that they can take home and try on a bunch of different things. So if they're just someone who just wants to take supplements, that nutritional information is really just going to be lost on them. If there's someone who's really only interested in the nutritional side of things, then, the herbal recommendations will be lost on them. So kind of giving them a whole wide variety of different options that they can choose from, things that they can implement in the moment. And just like, my days shift, I'm sure my patients' days shift too. And so they've got toolkits that they can use based on how those days go. So a little bit different because we take things like the full holistic picture into perspective. We're looking at lifestyle factors, socioeconomic factors, just as much as we are looking at the physiological. We
Hmm.
borrow from many different styles of medicine. So my practice particularly is influenced a lot by traditional Chinese medicine. It's influenced a lot by Ayurvedics. I do borrow from, many different energetic systems. There's not just one medicine system that is like the way, right? There's
Hmm.
several. And
You're
so
taking a lot
that's
more into account for sure.
yeah. So it gives us a lot to work from because, we know that like pharmaceuticals aren't just going to solve the whole picture and there's a lot of other factors that come into play. So guess yeah, that's kind of the biggest difference between us and your MD.
Yeah, because looking at your page, I had so many questions, which we'll talk about. But yeah, like thinking of just a normal doctor visit if something's wrong, I don't think anything you just said is discussed. It's what's your symptom? Here's the cream or the pill or whatever to treat it,
Yeah,
which
100%.
we don't really think about, but it's interesting
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah, like, think about it, your relationships, your friendships are still health, right? Um,
Hmm.
your environment, like, is there mold in your walls? Is there heavy metals in our water? And so these are all things that we need to take into consideration that like are direct impacts on health that like nobody's really asking about your housing in a medical office, right? Nobody's
Hmm.
asking about like the stress that like your relationships are putting on you, things like that. So, and that's the other thing too, like stress, it causes so much,
Hmm. For sure.
so much in terms of healthcare. And so, like, considering that, like, when we talk about stress, we sit down and before I even start prescribing herbs and things like that, I'm like, well, what's your nervous system regulation like? Do we need to prescribe like teaching you how to regulate your nervous system before we even start talking about herbs and medicines?
Hmm. Yeah. And I think there's so much information out there too. Like, I think what you're saying, a lot of people would want to try, but it's like, where do we start? Like on social
Yes.
media, like there's so much on, like I look up things that you're talking about. So my TikTok is like, eat this for hormone balancing, whatever. Try this exercise, try this food. If like, don't eat too much of this type of oat milk because you need to drink this kind. Like, there's so much. So I guess how
Yes.
do we navigate that and know what is correct? Because obviously there's the layer of like what works for one person. Like if you're lactose intolerant, obviously what you're going to eat is different than what I would eat. So there's that layer, but then, so how do we like generalize it and how do we even start looking at that?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so that's a great question. I absolutely love it because, there is so much information out there. A lot of it's very conflicting. And so I like to take it back to like, back in the 90s when you're looking at all these magazines in the grocery store and fat is the devil and cholesterol is the devil. And guess what? Cholesterol is actually the basis of all of our sex hormones. So, like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, these are actually all made by cholesterol. And so, like, all of these women back in the 90s going on these fat-free diets weren't even making their own hormones at one point, kind of thing. And so you can kind of see the falling out of that now, where I'm treating like a generation of people who are really struggling with menopause.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, we have a lot of issues with, say, like um, familial familial high cholesterol, essentially, where it's very genetic. No matter the amount of fiber you take, you're likely going to wind up on statins just because it's in your genetics. So it's really like that's like one very, very specific point of like how it's very, very difficult to kind of generalize this whole information, right? We do the best we can with the information that we have at the time. And so, I love this age that we live in because people are just trying to spread information. I'm just trying to spread
Mm-hmm.
information. I just want to educate people. But I'm always very cautious about that because there's a very, very, very fine line. And, oh, you should eat this. But like, no two people should be eating the same diet. If we all ate same diet and exercised the same way, our bodies would still look different. And we
Mm-hmm.
really, really, really need to take that consideration of like what we call biochemical individuality into play, which really just means that like on a very, very like basic genetic cellular level, no two individuals are the same. And so no two people are going to respond to food in the same way, right? So, there's a lot of information there. And I think it's really important to kind of like take it with a grain of salt, recognizing that your body isn't the same as the information that's being delivered to you. Having someone in your corner who just like knows, who knows, like someone like myself. It could be a
Hmm.
nutritionist, it could be literally anybody, but taking advantage of people who have this kind of education and training that can tell you why, we should listen to one piece of information and ignore the other and kind of present it to you in more of that individualized context. So there's so much information. Like I love it.
Hmm.
Healthcare is like really, really becoming I don't want to say it's like getting trendy, but like people are realizing the importance of like taking good care of their bodies. And I don't think that, there's ever going to be a bad side about that, but we really need to just approach this with more like of a scrutinous eye, with a little
Hmm.
bit more education and just a little bit understanding that like this super cute, influencer with flawless skin and a six pack
Right.
doesn't have the same genetics as you. She doesn't have the same hormonal presentation as you. Her
Hmm.
lifestyle conditions and yours are not the same. There's so many different factors that really just like come into why that works for her. But she shouldn't be touting it as like, oh, this is so good for everybody. Woo.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting because there is so much. Like I saw something the other day about caffeine and how it can regulate your hormones, or not so much regulate them, but throw it off maybe. So I guess a lot of what you do is like seeing how your hormones are affected. So like, can what we consume actually affect that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. So, like I just mentioned, number one, sex hormones made by cholesterol. So, we need fats, we need cholesterol to build those hormones to begin with. Number two, we've got the receptors in our bodies. So, I've talked a lot about in the past, like, say plastics. They can be known as hormone disruptors or endocrine disrupting chemicals, things like that. And basically, what happens is, these little things come in, they bind to your receptors. Your body makes your own actual hormones, and then it starts going around and seeing these plastics bound to the receptor and be like, "What are you doing in my house, man?" And so, because it can't get into its house, it starts going around, flipping tables, causing trouble everywhere else.
Hmm.
So that's another way that like can really affect your hormones. This is actually, I'm convinced that like plastics and endocrine pollutants are the reason that like our periods have gotten so bad as a generation, why we're facing infertility so much as a generation.
Hmm.
But then, yeah, and so that's the one thing. The other thing is diet. Obviously, sugars, things like that, everything that's processed through the liver, your hormones are also processed through your liver. So, a lot of people will sometimes show signs of like what we call estrogen dominance, which really just means that their estrogen that their bodies are making really has nowhere to go and they can't be effectively processed by an already like clogged up liver. Um, there's a million other things, and it comes down to like the environment you live in, how stressed your body is. But yeah, no, literally everything we do affects our hormones. Like consider like cortisol, for example. It's a hormone, it's our stress hormone, right? And so anything that works on that hormonal cycle, just like cortisol does, can impact the rest of the hormones as a whole. Yeah. And I could
Yeah.
go on. I could go on for a lot longer about that one.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess like what you said, it's just something to look into. Like if you are having those kind of disruptions or like imbalances, then that is something to consider
Oh,
for
100%.
sure. Um,
100%.
and something, yeah, something else I saw on social media actually. There was someone talking about how like our workouts should align with our period cycles. I don't know if I didn't include that in our list of questions, but I don't know if you know anything about that. Because, like, for me, looking at it, I'm like, that's one more thing that I have to think about when I'm like planning my workout schedule. Is this real? Does it have any benefit?
It does. It really does. I mean, for people who aren't super affected by their cycles, like, I'm not going to say sit down and be like, oh, make sure that, your period is a super, super restful workout. When it comes to that, we definitely have hormonal cycles. So I like to talk about we have like each week of our menstrual phase or each week of our menstrual cycle can be like attuned to its own season. What's drives me a little crazy about this is, men's hormonal cycles act in 24 hours, ours act in 28 days. And so, I'm like, man, you guys got an unfair
Mm-hmm.
disadvantage. But by the same token, we get a monthly check in on what's going on with our bodies. Our periods are a beautiful barometer of what is happening internally. And if you're willing to listen to it, it can tell you a lot. So, yes, when you're menstruating, the week before you menstruate, these are times that you want to like wind it down a little bit, focus more on like the yin stuff, maybe a little bit more like juicier weightlifting rather than like the more repetitive stuff. When you're ovulating and like just coming off of your period, this is when your energy is building. So I kind of put in the way like you wouldn't ask for a raise, something that requires lots of like good flow and energy when you're about to menstruate, right? Like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people know themselves, they know like their emotional habits, they know the way that they tend to speak changes, but everything about our body changes throughout each phase. So I like to call like the week of menstruation, that's our internal winter. That's when we're like, we should be restful, we should be cozy. When we're coming off and we're in our follicular phase, I like to call that, a little bit more of our internal spring. I love to treat ovulation as summer, go, 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 do all the fun
Mm-hmm.
things, be social, I guess, like be passionate, even the cool thing about ovulation is like, even your body's like symmetry changes, your facial structure changes, your lips get juicier. Like the goal, obviously, like when we think about it from a very like biological, like when you are ovulating, the goal is to get this girl pregnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of like your hormones are actually like changing to make you look like in the most subtle way. Take a picture of yourself when you're menstruating and when you're ovulating and just see the difference and like where your cheekbones sit, where your lips are sitting, how your breasts look, the curve in your waist. Like
Mm-hmm.
these things are all changing throughout the cycle. And so it obviously makes sense that during this kind of stuff, it would affect our own energy levels as well. It's going to affect your own output. And so, kind of like nourishing and protecting that energy when you get into the yin part of your cycle, the more like earthy, the more down, like cool down, get into the yin exercises, do more stretching. When you're ovulating and you're coming out of that menstrual phase, engage in a little bit more hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have so many questions after after that explanation. Um, because so I'm 28. A lot of my friends, a couple years older, a couple years younger, are starting to come off birth control. A lot of them it's because of the mental effects, and we didn't really know when we were 15, 16, 20, being put on birth control, all the effects. And you kind of, I guess, accept that the mental side effects are just there because it's worth it for not being pregnant when you're however old, or if you're not ready or whatever. But then there's other people who are ready to start having kids, so they get off it. And listening to all the side effects, for one, makes me afraid to come off it. But for two, I mean, I just have so many questions about how, if someone is wanting to do that, how should they start? Should you just come right off it? Should you even come off it at all?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm not a fan of birth control myself. The general research says they're like little tiny depression pills, and not in the sense they cure your depression.
Mm-hmm.
I do see a lot of psychological, emotional distress that comes from birth control for sure. I see it when people are coming off birth control, when they're changing their birth control. Now, I'm not necessarily in a way that I can kind of like tell my patients, oh, yeah, like I'm not licensed in that way. And coming off birth control again is like such an individualized piece. Some people come off it, they don't have any issues. But you have to think like when we go back to that cycle talk, right? When we're taking birth control, we're suppressing that natural cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so when your body is starting to re-engage in that natural cycle, it's going to be rocky for a couple of weeks. And the fun thing about periods and hormones and all that fun stuff, we only get once a month to see if what we're doing is working. So we're just like sitting there waiting with bated breath for the period to get there. And like, the menstrual cycle shows up and it's like, okay, actually, great. This one went easier. And so everything kind of rolls on because of that, 28-day cyclical practice. None of those 2 days are going to look the same. So coming off birth control, I always recommend charting for a month what, your symptoms look like from, your day one of your menstruation to day one of menstruation. And then coming off, tracking it again. I think it's useful to also track when you're ovulating for multiple reasons. Obviously ovulation is, you can get pregnant when you're not ovulating, but I would also wonder is like what's going on with your ovulatory cycle if you're getting pregnant, like say like 10 days after ovulation when you should be menstruating, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being able to track those cycles, knowing what your body is doing when it's ovulating, knowing what your body is doing when it's menstruating, this is going to give us a few key pieces because it's going to tell us like how your liver health is. Of course, if your digestion is not in check, then your hormones aren't going to be in check. If you're not pooping, like we need you pooping like at least twice a day because you're eating at least twice a day, you should be pooping twice a day. And so if you're not pooping, right back to the liver, our liver is only spitting out 5% of what goes through it in terms of metabolizing it. So that means 95% of what's going through it is back into the body. And so knowing what's happening with your digestion, even before you get off the pill, is going to be a huge, huge, huge help because it's going to tell you, if you're going to be able to metabolize those hormones as our bodies start making them. You're not going to know. It's like, oh my God, is this too much? Is this too little? I
Mm-hmm.
made this for you. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so, knowing what our digestion is doing is really, really going to be such a useful piece for that because then it's going to help us know like, oh, is this, are we going to have a harder time with our periods? Because if you're not pooping, then likely you are. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one step. Definitely, obviously, getting more greens into the diet. Those help the liver move a little bit quickly. Making sure you're getting good protein. Ensuring your mineral balance is good. So magnesium, zinc, iron, things like that. Those are also major players in how your periods are running. So making sure, I think the biggest step is track your cycles and be just, engaging in good nourishment across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It can be very complex, it sounds.
There's a lot that comes into play for sure. Like I
Yeah.
said, no two cases ever look the same. So, but that's what I love the most about it too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, and you mentioned like minerals and nutrients and everything. So I guess in general, and then I mean, obviously if it's in general, maybe it should be extra looked at if you're going to come off birth control, but should we be taking multivitamins? Um,
yeah.
I guess some people are just more deficient in certain
Hmm.
things, um, who would then have to take more. But like in general, if your health is pretty normal, you're not deficient in anything, should you be taking like a multivitamin?
Yeah. Oh my God. And another question. Oh, you're knocking it out of the park, girl. I really love this question because, so the word supplement, let's just look at the word supplement alone. It should supplement a healthy diet. So, I mean, I don't even take my supplements every single day. Now, I am trying to get a little bit back more into the habit of it now because, it's coming off Christmas holidays. I'm sure everybody's
Hmm.
nutrition could use a little extra love, my own
Yeah.
included. But yeah, there's again a lot of factors. So again, digestion. How well are you absorbing your nutrients? Like, are you absorbing what you're eating? If your digestion is compromised and you're not absorbing things. So usually I recommend that while you're healing your gut, yeah, you should be taking your supplements every day. Um, in the case of somebody being on like birth control, it's kind of funny because I always recommend a prenatal to my patients who are on birth control. And they're like, Erin, I'm trying to avoid getting pregnant. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But your birth control is actually depleting these nutrients that like
Right.
are in the prenatal. So in situations like that, when you're on certain medications that are like depleting certain nutrients, there's some of those that should be dosed more frequently. But when it looks at like the depletion factor, so there's a lot of talk now that our soils are more depleted than they ever have been. So like eating an orange now is not the same as it was eating an orange like 50 years ago. And we have to eat like more of those oranges to get the same effect from that one orange. Um, the research is up in the air. And then there's the other thing too that like our recommended daily required amounts of foods, um, they haven't really changed. So the average person, when these RDAs are being created, was say like 130 pounds for a woman, 170 pounds for a man, based on the say 200 to 300 chemical reactions that they were using at that time. So magnesium, for example, we'll use that one. Magnesium is recommended say 200 to 400 milligrams. but that's based on the 200 reactions that was taking place in the body at the time that we knew. And that was for average 130 pounds women, average 170 pounds men. The weight has gone up and the number of known reactions that magnesium is involved in has gone up, yet the recommended daily amount has not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's arguments on both sides. And for me, I think it's all about health should be easy, it should be joyful. And if you feel like your life is being run by your supplement schedule, then take a step back, because there's always ways that like we can combine, we can improve. It doesn't always have to be like, oh, I have to do this for my wellness. It should just kind of like be a little bit more fun than scheduled. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's definitely two sides to that one. I'm camp do what makes you happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So all kinds of healthcare is not easy to get into right now in Newfoundland specifically. Family doctors are, if you even have one, are not easy to get into. So, like, I personally don't have a family doctor. I volunteered at Planned Parenthood for a year. I know a lot of people use that as their family doctor for more reasons than just like sexual health. There's all sorts of things that people go there for because they don't have a family doctor. And I'm sure there's a lot of other clinics that are the same that people are kind of forced to go to or call 811 and all of that, which we know is not always a great time either. So do you have any tips on how people can manage without a family doctor right now?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The healthcare scenario here in Newfoundland is definitely rough. And it's frustrating too, because like if I want to see labs, like I can read labs. I'm trained like your physician to read them, but I can't order them specifically, right? So for me to get labs, even I have to send my patients to their doctor, get that requisition, get the blood work drawn, get back to the doctor to get their labs released to them. So even like I feel like I'm still even clogging up a healthcare system when I should be
Mm-hmm.
thinning it out. But it really just goes to show that, like, first and foremost, we need to be active in our healthcare. We need to be active constituents in everything. We need to treat our bodies with love, with kindness, because we're seeing more and more and more and more now that, like, if we don't take these measures ourselves, who is?
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at lab work, for example, oh boy, get ready. Get ready. So, thyroid stimulating hormone, for example, we have a normal reference range of zero point 0.9 to 4.3 nanograms per liter. That's a very wide range, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're looking around, like even at any of our like normal lab levels, these are all just designed to keep you out of a hospital bed. It is when those things are out of whack that we start, that's almost when it's gone too far. So, like blood sugar, HbA1c, your long term blood sugar measurement of 3 months. Once we start seeing that this is dysfunctional or by normal limits, you're already pre diabetic. And so, yes, while this is something that's very easy to come back from, it's something that shouldn't have even happened in the first place because we have the tools to prevent it.
Mm-hmm.
These lifestyle illnesses, not to say shame anybody who has them, because, we, like I said, we do the best with the information that we have, right? But a lot of these illnesses that are like not necessarily, they're taking a lot of room in our healthcare system. They're preventable. They're preventable through diet. They're preventable through exercise. They're preventable through regulating our nervous systems.
Mm-hmm.
They're preventable by, simply engaging with ourselves in a more consistent, healthier level. So, if you're not able to get into a family doctor and you need one, it helps to have someone like myself, again, whether it's a holistic nutritionist, a naturopathic physician, even a nurse practitioner, having someone like this in your corner. Yes, it's pay out of pocket, but I really love the saying, invest in your health now or pay with your health later.
Mm-hmm.
And even as like somebody who like knows healthcare, who knows bodies, like I've gotten myself into a position where I didn't pay enough attention to my health and like certainly paid the consequences. I put myself in hospital already this January with a Crohn's complication that, I don't know if it could have been prevented, but it was a very, very clear sign that I was overdoing it on my stress levels, because that for me is my biggest trigger.
Hmm.
So, obviously being an active agent in your healthcare, making sure you're getting your fruits, veggies, get outside, get sunshine, start your day like with actual real light instead of starting your day on your cell phone. Blue light, our brains, these beautiful creatures that they are, they don't know the difference between the light out in that window, and they don't know the difference between that and your screen light. So when we're on our screens late at night, your body's like, "Oh, you need the cortisol. It's noon. We gotta go do stuff." And then you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna like roll over and go to sleep now." And your body's like, "Oh, sorry, I thought you wanted the cortisol. You're gonna need some time." But that
Hmm.
cortisol is already inflammatory. Cortisol, your blood, again, your body doesn't know the difference between cortisol and sugar. So then you're already driving up your blood sugar with more cortisol, more cortisol, more cortisol, creates a diabetic state or an insulin resistant state. And so we need to be putting ourselves, like, we need to be practicing not just good eating, but also good sleep hygiene, getting exercise, getting sunshine. Like when the whole pandemic started and they were like shutting off trails and telling people like not to go on hiking trails, I'm sitting here just like,
Hmm.
we know like we know that we don't even need to like say like, oh, it's out to, like, the research is out on it. Like, no, we know the benefits of vitamin D and exercise on the immune system.
Hmm. Especially for
So
people in a province where we don't have a lot of sun.
exactly. So really, like, these basic things, and the other thing too is I think is not just about like how you digest your food, but how you digest the world around you. We have to be careful about what we're not just ingesting in our mouths, but ingesting everywhere else. And so, taking the time to just have a little bit more interest in your own wellness, in your own interest. Like if there's toxic people in your life, let them go, because they're going to create that state of dis-ease in the soul, which your soul is in your body. A diseased soul is going to create that disease in the body. Disease is the word, it's broken down, it's dis-ease.
Hmm.
And so we can see that very much manifestations of just not feeding our souls with like the love, nature, nurture that they need, right?
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing too is I think also advocating for yourself, if you do have a medical practitioner, doing your own research and, knowing, I guess, knowing your options, because these doctors, medical doctors, they're trained to work on an algorithm. Yes, they're brilliant humans. And I have, like, none of this is meant to disrespect doctors at all, because I have more respect for anybody working in our medical system right now
Yeah.
than, so I think it's, it's important to kind of be your own advocate in that sense. And like, if you feel like you're not getting the treatments that you need, ask, uh, ask your doctor. I want you to chart that you're not treating me for this and why. I know that, like, they're stressed out too. They've got a lot on their plates, but nobody's going to advocate for your health like you. And
Hmm.
so you need to be the main player in that sense.
And right now, like our government is not making it easy for them. Like
Yeah.
it is through no fault of healthcare staff. It's amazing that they're all even working. I know a lot of people who have gone like from permanent to casual, who have had to do all these things for their own mental health because they're forced to do a lot of things. And Eastern Health specifically says it's fine, but it's not fine.
There should be as well, like, we're not doing anything to retain medical doctors in the province either, right? Like,
Hmm.
there's, we've got the thing where like folks from 811, or was it 811, are getting paid $82 per phone call, while our doctors are only
Yeah,
getting like 32
I
per
saw
visit.
that.
So like there's a lot that can be done, because like honestly, there's no incentive for these folks to stay in our province. There's no incentive for them to take on extra patient load. They have to cap visits at like one
Hmm.
complaint per visit. So it's just, I have a lot of nurses on my roster who are just like the burnt out, the stressed, the frustrated. And I think just like right now is, it's just really going to show that like a lot of different, we have crumbling of different systems throughout history in every way, shape, or form. I hate witnessing the crumbling of our current healthcare system, but I think things need to collapse before that they can be rebuilt. We
Hmm.
can continue to advocate, publicly for systematic changes in healthcare, for more holistic approaches to healthcare. We need like subsidies on fresh fruits and vegetables. We need subsidies on agriculture in this province that are going to get more local fruits and vegetables so that they don't have to go all the way from, like, say, Argentina to be processed in Thailand to get flown to the States.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things that we can do systematically. And that's another thing, get involved, grow your own stuff in your backyard, like get involved with the food process. Because once we start showing our younger generations these things, that we can grow our own food, that we can be responsible for what is going into our bodies, what's going on around our bodies, then this is going to have a massive, massive, massive change. If we can show our future kids who are going to be our future adults, who are going to be our future doctors, our future politicians, our
Hmm.
future teachers, our future naturopaths, if we can show these kids how it's done, then we give ourselves a chance at creating more of a regenerative structure in the future. Sorry, I get so passionate about
Yeah.
this.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, like that's why I wanted to talk to you because I completely agree. And like with all of that, um, I also work for a company that's like our main goal is to fight climate change. So a lot of the things you just mentioned also goes with that. Um, but yeah, just the healthcare system, like I guess it does have to crumble, but you can't expect people who aren't healthy, like run our system and make healthy people, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
almost what
So
you
yeah,
said,
I
like
think,
starting from the roots, like the root of the problem is
and that's
that,
what we do.
yeah, the first line people are not at their best. So how can you expect them to give the best care? Not that they
Yeah,
aren't
no,
giving great
100%.
care, but I know that it is overworked and there are people who have to advocate for themselves more maybe than they used to
Hmm.
because everyone's in a rush. Like I had a appointment at St. Clair's and like I wasn't even like a checkup wasn't even done because it was something that I had been there for before. And it was just like, oh, it's still happening. We'll do this again. Okay, bye. Like literally under 60 seconds. And,
Yeah.
but I mean, I can't blame that person because they're probably way overworked. Obviously, they're not going to be on top of their game.
Yep. No, 100%. You nailed it. And I think too, like, my grandfather actually is he was a physician. He's still alive. He's 96. We were having New Year's Eve dinner together, and he said something to me about like having an awful lot of time off over the holidays.
Mm.
And I laughed. I looked at him. I said, Grandpa, of course I took the holidays off. I mean, number one, I work in private healthcare. And so, like, no one's going to be thinking about their naturopathic appointments, like when they're having Boxing Day, like brunch, right? Like, I don't want to put that on somebody. I don't want to put it on myself. But then there's the other thing too, is like you can see this like clear shift in culture where like he was of this generation of doctors that like didn't get respect unless they didn't sleep at all and they drove themselves into
Mm.
the ground. And I'm telling you, like, he did have like major stress related collapse in his 40s. Now, lucky he's, and he did have to change careers. He went from family practice into opening, again, another private health clinic. And so, my mom kind of said to him, she's like, well, she's trying to not like burn herself out and have to do a career change by
Hmm.
40. And grandpa looked at me and he was like, novel. Wish I had that kind of luxury in my career.
Yeah. I think even
So
like our parents' age, like even the generation kind of below him, it's very much like
go,
you
go,
got a
go, go,
job at
go.
18, you worked until you were however old, and it was like the grind, like no conversation about mental health, no conversation about like personal time or work-life balance or anything, which in that way we're very lucky.
Yeah. No, I think definitely think that there's needs to be a conversation fostered about like how do we do health as healthcare providers? How do we treat our healthcare providers better so that they can serve us better? It's a very like it's a symbiotic relationship. If our government is sick, our healthcare is sick. If our healthcare is sick, our healthcare providers are sick. If they're sick, they can't provide. And so this really, really, really trickles down. And so I like how you said, like, we have to look at the root cause of all of this because that's what we do as naturopathic doctors.
Mhm.
We call it root cause medicine. We go through this full review of systems to get to the root cause of what is making you ill. And I really think that we need to do that full review of systems, just like with everything
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, because we like you said we just know so much more. We know so much better. But like, why is
Exactly.
anything changing because we know better?
And that's it. A systematic change right now, we have to look at like, it's kind of a tinfoil hat conversation, but like it's one of the reasons that naturopathic medicine is not like the research in naturopathic medicine isn't funded because it doesn't necessarily make anybody else up there a whole lot of money.
Hmm.
And so, we have to find a way to get that systematic review without like, while still reminding people that our existence, our survival, not just our survival, but thrive, or like, how we thrive as well is like actually, more important to creating, long-standing health for our world.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think you kind of answered it, but do you think there's anything specific our government here in Newfoundland can do to improve this?
I mean, pay doctors what they're worth for one. I definitely think that's a good start, but just like do more to retain our medical students, do more to keep people here. Like we're facing the same kind of brain drain now in 2023 that we were facing back. Like I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, when especially in the 90s when we had that COD moratorium, right? Like all of our young people just started leaving the province in droves to find employment and education elsewhere. So I think that, we have to stop that brain drain from happening. And it's not going to happen until, our healthcare ministers really start to appreciate and recognize that like there's more than just pharmaceutical solutions and that we need to start figuring out how we can market wellness. And I mean, we're doing an okay job because like think like, we've got that like, physical like the exercise tax benefit or something. And there's things slowly happening. Like I see huge shifts already. The Newfoundland that I left at say like, my early 20s is a very different Newfoundland that I came back to 10 years later. And I mean, I see a shift in culture and I see a shift in difference already, sobriety, for one, is becoming a hotter topic around St. John's. There's a
Hmm.
lot more, dance events for sober people or sober curious people. I see the trend happening, a lot of my friend groups. I grew up as an absolute party animal. I was a wild animal when I was a kid. And, I can see that trend in like younger people who are not choosing to engage as much in substance abuse. And I can see it, even in my own circles who, are trading our early mornings at the club for early mornings at yoga
Hmm.
instead and things like that. So, Newfoundland is very interesting because we've always kind of had an interesting emphasis on our culture is like Jig's dinner, Mary Brown's, beer, India beer, Black Horse beer. Like a lot of our culture is around
Yeah.
like getting effed up and eating lots of salty carbs, which I'm not against.
Hmm.
I'm not against entire like I'm not against entirely like I think we've mentioned it before, but balance is really key.
Hmm.
Like there's no use of sitting down and eating all your vegetables and doing all your exercises if you're not going to let yourself have a little fun once in a while. And what that
Right.
fun looks like is up to you. But I do see a massive culture shift in how Newfoundlanders are starting to take care of themselves, take care of their families. And so I'm really hopeful to see that is just that culture shift is just going to keep continuing. And I think if that culture keeps continuing, it's going to keep putting pressure on our governments to do more for our
Hmm.
wellness and our health.
Yeah. That's the hope.
We can only
Yeah.
hope. And I mean, I don't think I would have gotten into this field if I wasn't like ultimately optimistic and hopeful about it, right? I don't think I would have come back to Newfoundland. Like it's frustrating to practice in Newfoundland doing what I do.
Yeah.
We're not getting a lot of support from our healthcare officials, but I don't know, wouldn't do if I wasn't hopeful, right?
Yeah.
So I really do believe that, there are shifts happening. It's just they're slow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always end with a piece of advice. So it doesn't really have to be related to your profession or healthcare or anything like that. Um, but is there any advice that you want to share that someone either gave you or something that you've learned?
Yeah. Just do what you want, honestly. I remember when I was starting off naturopathic medical school, fresh out of my sociology degree, had no background in health whatsoever, was going through a really wild transitional period And a lot of people ask, like, are you sure this is what you want? Like, it just like seems a little crazy for you. And I was like, no, this is what I want. And people tried to
Mhm.
talk me out of it all the time. Even when I got to like when I finally got into school, I ultimately failed out of my first semester. Nearly. They kept me in the program. They just made me go part time. But again, I was still getting the messages like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I just knew in my deepest heart of hearts that I am 100% meant to be where I am right now. I've never felt so fulfilled in my life, and so my advice is just always, always, always listen to yourself. Follow your gut, follow your heart. You know yourself best. And we need people who are just going to let their freak flag fly and do whatever the hell they want to make this world a beautiful, more interesting place. It takes all kinds.
Mhm.
And we really, really need all kinds. And so I just want people like really listening to themselves so that they can really just like thrive and flourish as who they are.
Yeah. I love that. And I agree. I agree with all of that.
Oh,
This whole podcast is kind of to do that, like to say what you want and to like say what's on your mind without someone or without caring what other people might say, I guess.
exactly. I
So yeah,
love
that
it.
lines up.
Oh, well, thank you for creating this and like giving all of our local businesses this amazing place to shine.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I still have so many more questions for you. Like if if nothing comes from this podcast, like if you don't get any more patients or anything, I am making an appointment with you because I have so many more questions and things about like my own health that yeah, we're gonna need an appointment.
Absolutely. I would love, love, love to have you on.
For sure. And so for anyone like myself who do want to book an appointment, where can they do that? Where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, for sure. So you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. My handle is dr.erinw.nd. I wasn't really the most creative when I was coming up with a business handle, so that's what you get. My website is drerinwoolridge.com. And through there, you can book an appointment. If you're still like super interested, but not sure if this is for you, I offer complimentary discovery calls. So you can kind of just book in a quick 15-minute chat. And if I'm not the right person for you, I'll happily direct you on. I'm mostly active on Instagram. That's kind of where most of my content goes. But if you wanted to keep up on my mail list or anything like that, the sign up form is over on my website. Yeah.
And I wanted to add too, because I know you said like appointments and things like that might not be covered under MCP or insurance or anything, but I know my employer does have like a wellness
A
allowance
wellness
that they give
budget.
you. So I'm sure that if anyone listening is interested in that, a lot of companies do offer that.
Yes, absolutely. That's super true. And I am doing a few, like, I do have patients that are funded through those kinds of
Mhm.
things as well. So I think it's important, always ask what your options are. If it isn't covered in your, like, insurance benefits package, see what kind of stuff that they have in their office for you. Cause, 9 times out of 10, somebody in your environment wants you well and will do what they can to kind of fund those visits. So
Right.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you for having me. I'm so grateful. I love doing this stuff. I love spreading the word. So yeah.
Yes. Love it. Okay, everyone go give Erin a follow on Instagram. Check out her website. Like I said, a lot of employers do cover things like this for wellness accounts or health spending, things like that. I think starting off the year, it's really important to do a check in with yourself. And when you think about it, you can't really think about your business or school or work or anything else if your health is suffering. So I think that's a great place to start the year or to make sure that you always check in with. So this is obviously a great place to start. It's really unfortunate that we aren't really taught enough about nutrition. And I mean, like she said, we didn't really know too much until recently, until the age of the internet, where so much information is so much more readily available. And I was telling a friend about this episode, and we were talking about how places in Europe are already so much more ahead. Nutrition is so much more important, and healthcare is so much more important. Certain foods and chemicals and like processed foods are all banned, and quality of food is so much better. And I think with a lot of things, if other places in the world are doing it better and having better results, I don't know why we can't do the same. And like she said, you just do need to take it into your own hands and seek this out and see what's best for you. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. These episodes are bi-weekly, every Friday. Sometimes I release them earlier if it so works out. But yeah, you can follow me at Newfound Happy Hour on Instagram and Facebook, and you can listen wherever you get your podcasts.